we can launch dynamic browser. Okay, that is you just need to change this variable name, and accordingly the driver instance would be initialized to either Chrome or Firefox or Edge. So this is only because WebDriver is an interface and all the other driver classes, they are implementing this interface. Okay, so I'll make a new Java project. Right, and today we will see, after writing such a code, how do you move ahead and interact with the elements in the browser? Right. So just hold on, let me add the tar files. Okay. Now, suppose, hold on. Let's take a simple example. Let's go to this website, zoho.com. Right. Suppose you have to sign in, or hold on, instead of this, let's go to salesforce.com. And suppose you have to log in inside this website. So I have to go to this URL. How to enter the user ID, password and all? For that, you need to understand that Selenium, it works on the page source of the web application. Right. If you right click on any application, you will get the option of viewing the page source. And this is there in every browser. Okay. So this is the page source. This is nothing but the HTML page source. Okay. If you go to any website, right. So you will get the option to get the page source. So in page source, you have nothing but some tags and attributes, like this is the tag div. Okay, this tag opens over here, closes over here. This slash div means that this tag is closing. And inside this div tag, there are many other tags. A tag can have multiple attributes, like this div tag over here has the attribute class. This is the frame tag. It has got ID attribute, name, width, height, source, title. There are different attributes with this frame tag. Right. So a tag can have either zero or it can have multiple attributes. And with the help of these tags and attributes, we go and identify the elements on the web page. Like for example, in case of Chrome, okay, you can right click on the element, and instead of going to the page source like this, you can inspect the element. For example, this is a link. So if you inspect this link, you will get something known as Chrome Inspector window opening up. This window is known as Chrome Inspector, and this is there in every browser rather. Okay, if you open, say, uh, Mozilla, and if you go to any website, and if you right click on any element, you will get the option to inspect, which will open the inspector. Okay, this inspector helps you a lot, right? But I prefer to use the inspector of Chrome browser as it's better, it's rich in features. Okay, so you just need to open the inspector by, suppose this is the sign in link, right click on it and say inspect. See, this is the sign in link, it's under the anchor tag A. Right, this is the highlighted code is the code for sign in link. You can switch to the top to bottom view. So this will go to the bottom. Right. So out here, this is um, this arrow. You look at this arrow. This is to select an element as well. So if you click on this arrow, and if you move the mouse over the elements, they will get highlighted. Okay. So if you are, for example, say looking at the link over here, news, you click over here, so the news link is highlighted. So the news link is an anchor tag. Okay, right. Now, you need to understand, in order to understand page source, you need to understand the way we have to extract the elements. Okay, basically you have to understand first of all the tags and the attributes and all, and how do they. All right, so let's do that. Just hold on. Just hold on, guys. Okay. So let's this. Okay. Okay, let us give it some time. Maybe something is happening. Right. Now, there are different types of elements on a web page. Okay. On a web page, there are different types of elements. And each element, I don't know what has happened. Just on it. Yeah. Each element has a certain tag name, like this is the anchor tag, and certain attributes. Okay, now let's look at the Salesforce website, for example. And if you have to type inside this username field, you can inspect this field. Okay, you click on this arrow and move the mouse over username. So this is the username field code. This is the HTML code for username. The tag name is input. So with the help of this tag name and maybe one of the attributes, like one of the easiest attribute is ID. If an element is having the ID attribute, then it is really easy to identify the element. Okay, so you see that this is the matrix which I had made. Okay, these are the different elements on a web page. On a web page, you can have a text field, you can have a button, radio button, checkbox, link, drop down, regular text, images. Okay, the text field, if you are having a text field, then the tag name is always input. Okay. So if you inspect any text field, the tag name would always be input tag. And there are some mandatory attributes which will always be present and some optional attributes which might be present or might not be present with the text field. Okay, the mandatory attributes in case of a text field is type. The type attribute will always be present. Like over here, for the password field, the type is password. For the username field, the type is email. The type attribute would always be present. Generally, the type is text, but in case of email IDs and all, we keep the type as email. So type attribute will always be there with the text field. In case of a button, like you have the login button over there, the tag name is always input. The tag name for button text fields is same, but the type attribute over here is equal to submit. That means it's a button. The tag name is input and the type attribute is submit. Fine. And in case of radio buttons, like hold on. Yeah. You see this radio button? If you inspect this, the radio button will always have the type tag name as input. But the attribute type, which is mandatory, makes it a radio button. Okay. Right. So the type attribute is radio. In case of checkbox, the tag name is again input, but the type is always checkbox. In case of link, the tag name will always be anchor tag. You take up any link. Okay. For example, these are links. If you look at these links, the tag name is anchor tag. Okay. Sorry. Tag name in case of a link would always be anchor tag, but there will be a mandatory attribute known as href, which will hold the URL which you click on when you click on the link. Okay, which will open when you click on the link. Okay, this URL will open when you click on this particular link. So in case of a link, the mandatory attribute is href. If you have a drop down, fine. The old HTML drop down, like for example, hold on. It's not letting me in. Anyways, uh, look at any drop down. Then this is a drop down, right? A drop down, if you inspect, will always have the tag name as select. Okay. So a drop down will always have the tag name select, but there is no mandatory attribute. All right. In case of regular text on the website, regular text which is there written on the website, like you have this text, okay, or any other text which is there on the website, right? Then um, you cannot quantify it. Sometimes it will come in fonts. There can be any tag. Maximum number of times it is either div or span or para tag, anchor tag. Okay, you cannot generalize the thing. The regular text on the web page can be in any tag, and there is no mandatory attribute like this. Okay, and in case of images, okay, in case of images, like you have this image. It's not, it's actually a span. The image is loading from within. Hold on. Yeah. For example, this is an image. The tag name is img. And the source URL holds the URL from which the image is loading. Okay, the source attribute will hold the URL from which the image loads. So in case of image, the source attribute is mandatory and img attribute or img is the tag name. Now, apart from this, there are few optional attributes which might be or might not be present. And these are generally ID, name, and class. Okay. If an element is having an ID or a name attribute, then it really becomes easy to identify the element, as ID or name can be unique for the element. Class might not be unique. There can be many elements on the web page with the same class. But still, if you have any element with ID, name, or class, then you know somehow with your experience it will come to you. You will actually understand that fine, okay, this element has a class, this element has an ID. That means it's easy to identify the element. Okay, now how do you identify the elements now? Okay, like for example, on the Salesforce, I showed you the username field has an ID. It's also got the name attribute. I'm taking a very simple example in the beginning. Okay, well, um, if you go to the Selenium website, and go to the download section and look at the API docs. If you scroll down, so yesterday I had told you there is something written as WebDriver over here. Okay, so WebDriver is an interface. Okay, so technically WebDriver is an interface. It's got functions which all the driver classes implement. If in any interview anyone asks you what is WebDriver, so basically in technical terms it's an interface. Okay, now if you scroll down, you will see something known as web element. Web element is also an interface, and this interface represents a general HTML element. All interesting operations to do with interacting with the page will be performed through this interface. Have a text field, button, radio button, checkbox, anything. Okay, anything falls under the category of web element. Okay, a button is a web element, a text field is a web element, a text on the web page is known as a web element, right? So everything on the web page falls under a web element. Okay, now if you look at this interface, it's got functions with which you can interact with the elements on the web page. The function is like clear, click, okay, or get the location of the element, say, get the size, get the text, is element displayed, send keys means to actually go and simulate the typing into the element. Okay, so this function has got commands with which you can interact with the web elements on the web page. Right, but how do you write the code? Okay, how do you write the code to interact with the elements? I'll show you. Right. Suppose after going to salesforce.com, you have to enter the username. So you write driver dot, you will get the function find element. Find element function goes and finds the web element based on some criteria. Okay, the criteria is defined by another class which is known as by. By class, this is the by class, has the mechanism used to locate the element within the document. So the by class will have the mechanisms with which you can extract the element, extract the web element, and the web element interface has got functions with which you can interact with that web element. Okay, now the by class mechanisms are simple. These are the different mechanisms. You can locate the elements with class name, CSS selector, ID, link text, name, partial link text, tag name, XPath. What is XPath? What is CSS selector? How do we use them? I'm going to tell you in coming classes. Okay, so out here you have the ID. You can also identify the element with ID. Right. In our case, the ID is username. Okay. So what you do is that you write over here driver.findElement by the ID and you give the user. Everything in by class is static in nature. You can call it directly with the class name. Okay. This command will give you web element. Okay, the web element username. You can name this anything, right? So driver.findElement by the ID of the username field. Okay, and now what do you want to do with this web element? If you write name dot, you will get the functions which can be fired on the web element. Example, I want to type. For typing, the function is send keys. Okay, anything. So the send function in web element, it's there to type inside the element, right? So now if you run this code, you see it goes and types hello, right? Similarly, if you look at the password field, the name of this field is PW. All right. So name is also supposed to be unique. And what we can do is we can try it out. We can write web element password equals to driver dot find element by the name and give the name. The name is PW. This will extract the password field and inside the password field you type. Right. So if you run this code, there is an error. if you run this code, you see that, right? And similarly, you have the login button. This login button has the ID as login. So you can write over here. This will give you the login button web element. Right. And what do you want to do with it? You want to click on it. So the click function is also there in the web element interface. Okay. When you run this code on, so when you run this, it will see it's trying to log in. It's a failure, right? It entered the user ID and the password as well. Fine. Now, act with one element. I am just writing 2 lines of code over here. Okay, so for 3 elements, I have written 6 lines of code. So you don't need to do like this and these lines. You can directly like find the element by the ID. So this will be the web element. And on the web element, you type dot send keys. Execution, it starts from the left side and goes to the right side. So first the web element is extracted and then on it the send keys hello function is fired. Right. So similarly for the password field, and similarly for the button. So you don't need to write 2 lines of code. Everything will happen in a right. So now if you run this code, the output will still be the same. But the only thing is we have not written multiple lines to interact with one element. You see that? It works. So any question from anyone in this? Anything? No questions? Right. So the whole magic is inside the web element interface. Okay, it's got all the features, all the functions which can interact with the elements on the web page. Right, so you first extract the element. This highlighted portion extracts the element based on a criteria. The criterias are defined by the by class. There are many criterias. We will see each of them one by one as we proceed with the course. Right. So you can extract the element with the ID, with the XPath, with the name, with the partial XPath. Right, any criteria. Okay, what are XPaths? I'll tell you with time. XPath is like the address, it's something like the address of the element on the web page. Okay, like you have a house number, house address. So similarly, every element can have an XPath as well, right? Now, one thing, if finding an element, I'm typing the username, I'm typing the password. Typing the password over here, I give a name or a value which is not existing on the web page. Okay, so if you run this, so this types hello and immediately throws an exception. No such element exception. That means it's not able to find a certain element. The exception is something which is undesired stage of the program where you don't want to reach. Right. We will study exception handling in detail as well, but just giving you an overview. Fine. Now, at times what will happen is that the element might be present, but it takes a little time for the element to be loaded. Even after the page has loaded or something, maybe the element takes 3-4 seconds. One option is that you put a little bit of delay. Red.sleep, say 5000. Red.sleep is just like uh, pausing the program. Okay, if I write thread.sleep 5000, that means I'm pausing my program for 5 seconds. No matter whether the element appears in the first second, second, or it doesn't appear, it doesn't even matter. Okay, thread.sleep will simply go and pause your program. Okay, so if you run this now, you will see that the exception will not come up immediately. It will take 5 seconds, and after 5 seconds, see, exception came up. Thread.sleep, I won't say it is bad, but it can be avoided with Selenium. Okay, known as implicit weight. Just after opening the browser, when your driver is initialized, you write this line. Duration dot of seconds 20. Implicit weight, first of all, has to be given in the beginning of the program, and it is a global timeout. Okay, it is applicable to all the driver.find element commands. Okay, if the element is not found, okay, Selenium will wait for the amount number of seconds, like I have written 20 seconds over here, Selenium will wait for 20 seconds. Maximum 20 seconds, and it will keep on finding the element. But if the element is found in the 5th second or the 7th second, it will move forward. Okay, it will not keep on waiting. It's not like pausing the program. So this is dynamic wait. It's a dynamic wait. If the element is found in earlier, it will use the element and move forward. Okay, so first of all, this implicit wait is a global wait which is applicable to all the driver.find element commands in the program. So that's why we give it in the very beginning. Okay, and dynamic wait. You like thread.sleep was simply pausing the program. It was not concerned about the elements. This thing is concerned about the element. If the element appears earlier, it will use it. It will ask Selenium to use it. So if you run this code now, it will wait for 20 seconds, and for 20 seconds it will keep on polling the web page for the element. If the element appears, it will use it, and it will throw an exception only after 20 seconds. You see that now? This exception is thrown after 20 seconds. Right. And anybody with any questions? Anything? Right? So implicit wait, you have to make sure that you give this in the very beginning of the program. Don't give it in the end or in between. It has to be given. It's a global timeout. It is applicable to all the driver.find element commands. All right. There is also something known as explicit wait, which can help you exclusively wait for a certain element. We will do that not now. Okay, in the coming classes, we will be looking at explicit wait as well. Right. Okay. Now we have seen you can extract the elements by the ID, by the name, and all different things. There are different criterias. But every time you element cannot have an ID or a name. Okay, right. For example, just a minute. Yeah, if you look at right, for example, on this web page, if I have to it's having an ID. If I have to say click on this link investment tool, it's an anchor tag and there is no ID. Okay. So not all the elements in this in a web application will have an ID or a name. If they are having ID or a name, then the work becomes easy. Otherwise, you will have to go for XPaths. XPath is like the address of the element on the web page. Like you have an address, that address uniquely identifies you. Okay. So similarly, on web page, you have got XPaths, and XPaths, they are like the address. Okay. So how do you build XPaths? How do you make XPaths? And how do you actually you know, um, work with experts. I'll not start with that today, okay, because it's going to take me time to cover that experts in detail because there are two types of experts, absolute experts and partial experts. So experts are something which will help you to identify elements which cannot be identified in a normal manner. But to understand XPaths, you will have to have good skills, understand the page source as well. Okay, so we will take up XPaths in the next class, and next class will be on the Monday morning Indian time, which will be Sunday evening US. Okay, right. So we'll stop here. I'll send you the recording. Okay, anything from anyone? Hello?
Yeah, Ashish.
Yeah.
So I just want to ask, like, suppose if there we have multiple Java file, and so for each Java file we need to be mentioned implicitly weight there, or it would
Look,
be
it
only.
doesn't matter if multiple Java files or one Java file. Whenever you are initializing your driver,
Mhm. Okay.
whether you're initializing it once in five files or five times in five files, whenever you initialize your driver, whenever you write this code, you will have it's a good practice that you give an implicit weight
Okay.
after opening the browser. Wherever you are opening the browser, you should be giving implicit weight.
Okay.
Okay?
Mm. Okay.
Yeah. Anything else from anyone? Yeah. So we'll meet on Monday morning now, which will be Sunday evening US time. Please do the exercises which I have given you. You have time with you, you have videos with you. Okay. Because gradually, you will feel that if you are not practicing, then you have lagged behind and that will cause problems. Okay. Fine then, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Ashish.
Okay.